My name is Jesper Birch Jensen, and I work as an equity research analyst at ABG, where I cover gaming stocks and technology stocks as G5 Entertainment. And with us today, we have Stefan Wikstrand, who is the CFO of G5 Entertainment, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the company. So please go ahead, Stefan.
Thank you. So my name is Stefan. I'm the CFO of G5 Entertainment and been with the company for a bit more than 4 years. To start, I will just do a quick brief of what we do for those who haven't met us before. So G5 is a developer and publisher of casual free-to-play games for tablets and smartphones. So essentially we do mobile games. That's what we do. Mobile gaming is a big market today, well over $70 billion USD in annual revenue. We operate this market through 7 offices that we have worldwide. We have our development capacity in Eastern Europe. So we have 2 offices in Russia. We have 2 offices in Ukraine. We have our office here in Stockholm. We also have our CEO based in San Francisco together with the marketing team to be close to the stores. And we have an office in Malta with senior developers. Also our COO is based in Malta. We focus on a female audience of women over 35. And I will come back to why that is a good thing. And we release on all relevant platforms, so the Apple ecosystem with iPad and iPhone, Android, Amazon, Windows. We do a bit of Facebook. We also do a bit of desktop as well, but that's minor. Primarily the major mobile platforms. I was hoping that I could show you a reel of our newest release game, Jewels of Rome, to just explain a bit further about what we do, but unfortunately something was corrupt with the file, so you just have to live without and try the game when you get home to get a feel for it. Jewels of Rome. I will start with looking a bit in the rear view mirror. So we closed 2018 a while ago. It was the best year in the company's history so far. Looking at the chart, we started going into mobile gaming in 2009. We did unlockable games up until 2012 through 14, where we transitioned over to free-to-play games. And since then, the revenue tenfolded up until 2018. We've also shown good earnings during that period of time. But most importantly also, if we look at the numbers for 2018, our players spent 700 million hours playing G5 games, which is a testament to the entertainment value that we actually bring to the market, and which is the foundation of what we do. Brief touching on the global gaming market. A market that was, well, then essentially nothing in 10 years ago, or very small. It has grown to where it is today, above $70 billion USD in annual revenue, and is set to continue to grow in the coming years as well. So we see that growth continuing up to 2021 and also going forward into the future. So in 21, we expect the market to be well above $90 billion USD in annual revenue. And that is built up of over 2 billion people playing mobile games, and that is also set to grow. For us, equally important is though the growth in spend per user. So the users spend more in their games. It's a more natural part of your entertainment mix than it was before, and you're also more accustomed to then spending in the games. So that is an important trend that kind of underpins this growth. So looking a bit at the product that we have. So we have a target audience of women over 35, as I said. So it's a growing demographic. It's still an underserved market. It's a very loyal audience, so they continue playing the games for a very long period of time. And it's also a strong paying audience. So looking at the amount of users versus looking at how the spend is distributed, women over 35 is a very strong category in terms of spend. So we address the market through 3 categories of game. We have the hidden object game genre. We have the Mahjong solitaire games. We have our newest kind of niche, which is match 3 games. That is tied together with our Friends network that are built into all of our games, which is a social platform, and it's called G5 Friends. And the users benefit from using it because they get the ability to play cross-platform. They can also store their progress if they lose their device. They build actual Friends network in the game that helps them forward in the game, but also of course, allows chat functions, etc., and where they actually build a network. And for us, it's super important where we can get a bit more data on the users, of course, but also a tool to keep them engaged in the game, increase the stickiness of the game through the social network. And we can also cross-sell between games. For example, the users can see when a friend of theirs starts playing another of our games, which then prompts them to start playing that game as well. So just an example of how that is used. So looking a bit more at the categories of game, so we have the hidden object games, which is still our biggest genre. Here in the picture, it's represented by Hidden City, which is our biggest game. Hidden object games are very immersive in terms of storyline. They include a lot of features to keep the players engaged. You have the base, which is the actual hidden object core game or grind game. We've also had on top a lot of various different puzzles to keep an interest in the game. We have match 3 parts, we have different puzzles to keep them engaged in the game. As I said, it's our primary genre. It's where we're biggest. We're still a market leader there. It's not a lot of competitors doing hidden object games because they have a certain touch and feel in the production of them. But still a genre that we see can grow in the future, both through our and others' execution. So a very strong and healthy niche. We have 2 hidden object games today that have grossed over 100 million USD in lifetime revenue, and we actually have one that passed 200 million. So the 150 is a bit obsolete on this slide. We also have more hidden object games coming to the market, apart from the ones that we already have released, where Homicide Squad would be one example that has performed quite well in the last 18 months. Our second genre is the Match 2 or the solitaire games. Here on the picture represented by our Mahjong journey. Match 2 is what it is. You match 2 similar objects to solve the puzzle. If you look at Mahjong, which is based on the kind of ancient game of Mahjong, you match 2 Mahjong tiles to solve the puzzle. Fairly simple. We call this our evergreen genre or titles. It's very casual. People come back and play them for a long period of time. I usually call it my kind of airplane type of game. I play it when I fly. It's very casual and relaxing, so an enjoyable playing experience. So we expanded this with our game Solitaire Magical Tour, which is a card-based game instead of Mahjong tiles. That was released in December 18 and still is in soft launch. We also have our newest addition to the categories of game, which is the Match 3 games. And the picture here is Jewels of Rome that you saw before. It was not our first release. We released Pirates and Pros in August of 2017, so that game is 2 years. Match 3 is a very big segment of the market. So we see more than 5 billion USD in global annual revenue from Match 3 games specifically. Once again, the base is fairly simple. You see here on the picture that you have 3 apples that you should match. So you match 3 similar objects if you haven't tried a Match 3 game. So fairly easy to learn, but complex and gets, of course, harder the more you play. It's a very popular audience with our target audience as well. We can see that both from market research, where you have very popular Match 3 games for the women over 35 category. But also we see that in our existing games where we, for example, in the hidden object games have Match 3 puzzles built in, and we can see that converts really well. So we have Pirates and Pearls launched in August 17. Jewels of Rome was launched in June of 19 in the end. Quickly became our number 4 in terms of revenue, so the company's best release so far. It's a bit more complex meta game in Jewels of Rome compared to Pirates and Pearls, but then we also had the benefit of using the engine from Pirates and Pearls in Jewels of Rome to simplify the launch. We also have Matchtown Makeover, which was soft launched in June in Australia and New Zealand only. That game has an even more complex meta game that required us to test it in test markets before to get it ready for a global launch. We also have additional Match 3 games in the pipeline for release in 19. When speaking about the product, I'll just recap this slide that we usually have as well, the life cycle of a free-to-play game. So we have the game is developed internally nowadays primarily. We take it through idea and development and release it in the market, which is where a large part of the work starts. We get an audience in the game in what's called a soft launch period here, where we test it and see how the users behave, how sticky it is, where they get stuck, where it's too easy, and try to improve the monetization of the game to find a good balance between difficulty and the amusement of the player. When we think we have figured out the secret sauce for that specific game, we start scaling it with user acquisition. And then revenue responds to that. Usually we see a plateau coming after a while. So the revenue flattens out and the team needs to figure out how to rebalance the game or fix whatever is needed. It could be additional content or it could also be something that needs to be fixed in the game. And then once again, we start scaling the game with user acquisition, organic traffic and cross-selling to try to get the game to its highest potential. After that, you would usually see initial churn of revenue just because the game gets more mature, so it's a bit tougher to market. You usually adjust a bit on your user acquisition strategy, which creates a bit of an initial churn, and then the curve flattens out to a long tail revenue. We expect the long tail revenue to be quite long, both from what we see in the market, but as well from our other games that are a bit older. So we expect 2/3 of the revenue be from peak levels and onwards. So a large chunk of the revenue is coming there. I took exactly the same slide and took in the quarterly revenue chart that I showed on the first page, just to show you that you can actually see a bit of similarity in the pattern as well. Our biggest game was Hidden City, that grew from 16. You can actually see the growth. You see a bit of a plateau and you see growth again up until peak levels. So it seems like the pattern is we can see that in the actual numbers as well. While at the same time, we often get stuck with talking about Hidden City. Hidden City is our biggest game. It's a very important game in our portfolio and has been since it started growing in 2016 and overtook Secret Society as our biggest game. It's been an amazing growth journey, but one shouldn't miss also the fact that the own portfolio has grown quite significantly, and today the own portfolio is bigger than the company was in the beginning of 2016. So we've seen very strong growth in the rest of the portfolio as well, that kind of underbuilt the growth that the group has seen. And in the last year or two, or the last 2 years, we focused a lot of efforts on strengthening the development teams to also fuel that development of our own games. From that, we've seen very positive developments in what we can achieve in the development department. The first game we actually test this new structure of development team was Homicide Squad, which started growing and has grown nicely for the 18 months up until the close of Q2. We also saw Jewels of Rome being the best release the company's ever made. That was released in June of 2019. Unfortunately to this story, Mahjong Journey slipped a bit in H1 due to some experiments made to the game, which is kind of a normal course of action to test, to try to improve the game, but sometimes, unfortunately, that fails a bit. But still, we see very strong, very positive development from the increase in development capacity. So as I said, Matchtown Makeover is also released in June. It's released in Australia and New Zealand. We're also actively working, the development teams are working actively on a few games on the portfolio, and we also have 2 more games for release in the second half of 2019. We have 2 existing games that will see major updates, and we have 1 game that is rehauled and will be relaunched in H2 of 2019 as well. So a lot of stuff happening on the portfolio, and that has always been kind of the core of what we're doing. We aim to work with a portfolio, and then we try to run with the outliers as fast and as high as we can. And this is the top 8 games in the portfolio currently. As you can see, some of them have a few years on them. So Hidden City was released in 2014. It took 2 years before the game started to grow in 2016 for real. Mahjong Journey was released in 2015 and has been a very stable performer for us over the years. Homicide Squad has been very strong in the last 18 months up until Q2 of 19. Hope to see that continue. That was released in January 2017. Well, Jewels of Rome on 4th place, which is the latest release. You actually can see this list on our webpage as well if you want to check it out on a day-to-day basis. Usually it's quite stable, but it could be interesting to watch. We have Secret Society. Speaking of long tail revenue, was released in November 2012, but still a very solid performer for the group. And then we have a few other games. Survivors, we have Pirates and Pearls, which is our first match 3 game, and Supermarket Mania, which is a legacy game and one of the previous genres that we've had that we've now closed. Looking a bit at the financial before we wrap up. So as I said, 2018 was a really strong year. We came out, so starting 19, if you look at comparison Q1, Q2 18, we saw our peak revenues up until this point in that period of time on the back of the success of Hidden City, which then matured during Q2, which has caused the sequential development since then. We're quite happy though with seeing a nice stabilization in Q2 where we had -3 sequential revenue decline in Q2 over Q1. So we see a stabilization there. We're also very happy with keeping our geographical footprint, which is really strong for being a Western developer. We've always been big in North America, which is a significant and important market to us and for the majority of the Western developers. But we still have a very good footprint in Asia, primarily represented by Japan, but not always an easy chore to be successful in Asia. So very strong there. Europe and rest of the world stable and a kind of a well-balanced geographical distribution. Looking a bit at earnings as well, it's a bit of the same story as on the previous slide. Hidden City was invested heavily in Q4 in 17, and on the back of that, we saw really good margins in Q1 and Q2 on the back of the kind of highest revenue of Hidden City. So very tough comparison. You can see here that Q4 usually is a very investment-heavy quarter for us, where we invest in user acquisition. It's a very strong season, especially for the North American market, where you have 3 holidays. In Q4, people convert really well. It's also a bit colder, so people play a bit more games than they do during summertime. So all in all, a very good investment quarter, but usually we invest when we see potential, but naturally by the cyclical nature of it, Q4 is usually a very strong quarter for us. Here we just want to point out, we usually point out the EBIT margin before user acquisition that we point to as a measurement, because the user acquisition efforts that we do can be very volatile between the quarters. So it's also good to keep an eye out on the EBIT margin before user acquisition. It's been declining a bit, both because of the revenue has declined a bit, but we've also invested a lot of money into the development capacity, increased the workforce significantly. That puts a bit of pressure on that margin, but we'll hopefully see benefits from that going forward. To sum up the numbers part, we look at the cash flow. So a bit negative cash flow in the first half, but still a very strong cash position of 125 million SEK. In the first half of the year, or actually in Q2, we paid both dividend for this year, and we paid taxes in Malta, amounting to 28 million. A large part of that will though be repaid in 2020. So it's essentially a loan to the Maltese government. As I said, strong financial position and cash flow from business operations remain quite stable and healthy. Yes, the FTE development as well, just to show you as I said, we've almost doubled the amount of people we have employed in the company the last 2 years, almost exclusively in development. So we've both expanded the amount of teams that we have so we can have more streams active, but also expanded the team so we have dedicated resources to each game, which was an investment in itself. An important thing to do to give us the chance to do the shots of goals needed to be able to succeed in mobile gaming, and also to increase the quality in what we do. So very, very important investment phase that we're in, and we will see more of the games coming to the market shortly as well. So to sum up, So looking at 19 and maybe a bit into 2020, we're still very financially healthy. We're debt-free. We have a very strong cash position, which allows us to invest when we see opportunity to grow, both in terms of investing in the games portfolio, but also investing in marketing to achieve growth, which is still primary key for the group. Hidden City remains very popular. It has a very loyal following, and we expect that to continue for years to come. We also have a very promising pipeline of wholly owned games. The Homicide Squad that I talked about, which has been around for a while, has grown very nicely over the last 18 months. The release of Jewels of Rome was really successful. We continue to work with the existing games in the portfolio, but we also have a lot coming to the market. So we have 2 new games in hopefully shortly that we can communicate more about. We have 1 relaunch that's coming, as well as 2 major updates. So a lot of activity going on in development, which is due to just the fact, the last larger text there, that they are stronger than ever. We have more teams and bigger teams that can do more with higher quality. I think that was it from me.
Thank you, Stefan. First off, I was wondering if you could expand on the match 3 genre. Obviously, you entered it in 2017 with Pirates and Pearls, and I was just wondering, what have you learned from that launch that you've applied to the launch of Jewels of Rome, which has been so successful so far?
Well, one is as I said, the mechanic of the game. We've been able to test Pirates and Pearls with a decently sized audience for quite some time, so we know a lot more about the kind of the match 3 mechanic and developed that a lot. Also, we see that match 3 is highly competitive. It's a huge segment of the market, and the Jewels of Rome have been a very kind of a standard match 3 game where you follow a path and succeeding levels, where Jewels of Rome has a bit more complex metagame and Matchtown Makeover even more complex. And I think that is probably needed to give some extra edge to the game. So I think those are probably 2 key takeaways to be able to be competitive in match 3 today.
And speaking of Jewels of Rome, it's obviously grown very quickly and became your 4th largest game by terms of revenue. Has this surprised you, or did it all go according to plan?
Well, you always hope in one regard, but we're also very tough on ourselves when we do look at what we do, and we try to keep our hopes on a reasonable level, which is usually good. It's better to be positively surprised, but I will still say that maybe a bit positively surprised in general from the how it's gone so far. So it will be interesting to see. It's still early days, and there's a lot of work to be done on the game, and hopefully it will have a very long lifetime like the rest of the games we have in the portfolio. So a lot of work to be done, but it was. I think it was a bit of a surprise for everyone. Yeah.
And looking at Matchtown Makeover, do you have higher hopes for that compared to Jewels of Rome, or what do you predict there?
I think it's a very interesting title. It's more complex, as I said. I think it definitely, in terms of graphic and how it plays, it's a really good title. But then in the end, it's a more complex metagame. It also requires more work and to figure out all the details that we need to get right to be able to have a game that monetizes really well. So it will be very interesting to see when we get to global launch and see how it performs. But a more complex game, you probably need to assume as well that we need a bit more time to tie all the kind of knots together. So, but I'm looking forward to the global launch at least.
Okay, thank you, Stefan, for coming here.
Thank you.
Present G5.